Welcome to Intuitive Astrology with Molly McCord. Thank you so much for joining me today as we take a look at an interesting topic that affects all of us. We're going to look at what happens when outer planets are directly impacting and influencing your personal planets. So I'm going to consider this podcast more of a class and a teaching episode rather than a typical forecast or energy update. In this class, we're going to go a little bit deeper so that you can understand what is coming up for you, where the universe is pointing its finger and saying, right here, this is your assignment, this is where your attention is being required. So we're going to talk about these outer planets, and this is going to be part one, where we look at Jupiter, Saturn, and Chiron when they interact with your personal planets. So we have 5 personal planets: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. These are the planets that travel closest to the sun. These are the ones that make up your immediate personality, your sense of self, and your needs. This is where you understand, through the energies of each planet, what influences your intentions and your needs. Now, I know that many of you are more intermediate and advanced in your astrology, so this is just going to be a quick review that your sun sign is your sense of self. It is your ego identification. It is the energy that you are here to shine, the sun being the brightest light in the solar system. Your sun sign is where you're continually growing and developing traits and themes throughout your life. Your moon is your receptive nature. It's your emotional world and how you respond to the world around you. It describes your daily needs. It describes how you move about your day, your daily patterns, your daily rhythm, and it also goes into your feelings and your emotional nature. Mercury is the planet associated with how we think, speak, communicate, and how we process information. It's how you take in the stimuli all around you, how you sit with it, how you create your thoughts and then communicate what you need to say. It is about learning. It's the mental energies that compose how we experience our world. Venus, a feminine energy, is how we receive, and she's about how we receive based on love, how we love ourselves and what we believe we're worthy of. Venus is teaching us about love throughout our life. She is connected to relationships and how we give and receive in relationships. She's also connected with what feels good, what gives us confidence, what makes us feel taken care of. Mars is the masculine energy in the chart, one of the masculine energies, and Mars is about our desire, how we take action in our physical body. It's how we go for what we want, how we assert ourselves. Mars is where we show up to get things done and to take command, and Mars is how we go after what we want. So you take these 5 personal planets, and they create a special recipe for you in your natal astrology chart, based on, of course, the date, time, and place of your birth. So you look at each of these 5 planets, and you begin to get a fuller picture of who you are, what your needs are, how you learn, what you need to feel loved, how you take action in the world, how you are on a daily basis, how you're here to shine, how you're here to be yourself, and to know more about yourself. So when these 5 planets, any of them, are receiving an energetic influence from an outer planet, it greatly affects that personal planet, meaning it changes, shifts, evolves part of you, of your personal identity. It's where these innermost areas of yourself are receiving a stronger impact that is requiring growth, that is requiring decisions, that is requiring choices. And I wanted to talk about this because it's very important to understand that we are each on our own timeline with these energies. So something I'd like to also call out is that the outer planets we're looking at today, Jupiter, Saturn, and Chiron, are very much about how we are learning, maturing, and healing in this lifetime. And you could have in your natal astrology chart a very strong connection between Jupiter, Saturn, and Chiron and one of your personal planets. For example, you could be born with Chiron conjunct your moon. Then this would be an influence that would be a big part of your life that you'd be working with throughout your life. And in fact, that moon energy would actually always feel that it is deeply connected to the themes of Chiron. Now, you could have Saturn squaring your Mercury in your natal astrology chart, in which case your natal Mercury would always feel that strong pressure or presence of Saturn. And this always becomes more dynamic and complicated based on the astrological signs that are involved and based on the house placements. And many of you who know astrology know that the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the more layers you uncover, the more things that connect and come together. So I think it's important to note that yes, you can have these strong energies in your natal astrology chart, meaning on the day you were born, the time and place, you had the strong presence of Chiron conjunct your moon, or Saturn squaring your Mercury, or perhaps Jupiter conjunct your sun, Jupiter opposing your sun. Anytime one of these outer planets is directly aspecting a personal planet, it creates a strong influence on how that energy is felt and expressed. So this becomes quite dynamic, and of course there are thousands of ways these aspects and energies can show up. So I strongly recommend that you study aspects. There are very good books out there, Planets in Aspect, Planets in Transit. There's really quality astrology books that help you understand these specifics even more. And one thing that I do recommend, especially if you've taken any type of astrology class with me, is that we often have to learn it slowly, meaning we learn astrology slowly. It is not a fast thing because there's pieces you have to put together. And you also can learn by sitting with an aspect, sitting with a theme in your chart and looking back on hindsight to see how that has showed up for you. So if, for example, Saturn squares your Mercury, well, this would greatly affect your early learning experience and how school felt for you. If you needed more time, if you needed more assistance, if you just needed to take your time to learn new topics, or certain topics were more difficult for you than others, that would be the influence of Saturn squaring your Mercury, which is you want to go slow, you want to allow things to integrate, maybe do a lot of exercises, a lot of problems, and then you get it, which is a different learning speed than someone who would have, say, Mercury conjunct Mars, and they're a very quick learner, and they're very fast, and they can take in a lot of information at once. So the more you get to know your own chart, the more you see how these energies have shown up for you throughout your life. So give yourself time to learn this astrology, and know that it's not something that you just understand overnight. I've been doing this for 30 years. There are still things that I'm learning and that I'm connecting the dots on. There's still things I sit with and consider because there's multiple potentials and possibilities for how the energies can be expressed. And that's actually one of the very cool things about astrology, is that it's self-verifying. It's self-verifying. You verify through your life, through your experiences, through what you've learned and your choices, how the energy has shown up for you. And what's really amazing is that then raises your own consciousness, and you start to see your patterns and your themes, and then where you could make a different choice or how you could express that energy in a new manner. So in this, again, I'm calling it a class, in this podcast class, we're going to look at what it means when Jupiter, Saturn, and Chiron are connecting with these 5 personal planets. Now, again, it could be through your natal chart or through transits, the transiting planets, which is where the planets are right now. So let's start with the energy of Jupiter. Jupiter's intention is growth. It's what we're learning, what we're developing, how we can see from a higher perspective, a bigger vantage point. Jupiter wants us to expand and wants things to be easy, wants to bring in the good news and the fortuitous developments. Jupiter is where we are here to see the bounties of energies in the world. So when Jupiter is making an aspect to a personal planet, its intention is to teach that personal planet something. Now, as I said, this is where things can get complicated because there's many types of aspects. There is the conjunction, sextile, square, trine, opposition, inconjunct. So I'm not going to go into all of those. I'm just going to give you broad strokes about what it means when the planet is interacting with a personal planet so that you can look at it through your own lens and apply it to your own life. And by the way, if this is all new to you, if you are wanting to learn more about your own chart, I do offer an introductory astrology course that is 6 different classes that goes through the basics of astrology. So if you need that, if you need something fundamental or foundational, you can find that link below this podcast. So the energy of Jupiter wants to bring in something of growth and development and asks you to think in a different way or a bigger way. Jupiter can be an exaggerator. It can be too much of a good thing, but it ultimately wants to offer support to that personal planet. And it happens through the different aspects. So when Jupiter is having a conversation with one of your personal planets, it's saying, what are you learning? How are you growing? What is here for you to make the most of? In traditional astrology, Jupiter is known as a benefit, which means a beneficial planet. I actually don't subscribe to those simplistic views of astrology, but I think it's beneficial to know that that's some of the terminology used. Jupiter is where we can keep the spirit alive within us because it's associated with faith, hope, positivity, optimism. How can you see this in a better way? What are you understanding that you didn't know before? So there's an element of Jupiter around staying open to the possibilities of the world. And when this energy connects with a personal planet, it's going to influence how that personal planet feels and what that personal planet is learning right now. So again, you could have strong Jupiter in your chart connecting to one of your personal planets. That would be your natal chart, or Jupiter could be working strongly with one of your personal planets through transit. And as I do this program right now, Jupiter is in Capricorn. So what we're learning with the Jupiter in Capricorn is to go forward towards what we want, to set inspiring goals, to be very aware of what our career and professional life is manifesting, if it's the right track for you, if it's what you truly want to be doing. And if not, then Jupiter in Capricorn can help with a redirect or a pivot. It can help you make some changes and shifts that are for your best and highest good. In general, Jupiter helps us not only learn and grow, but can make things easier. And when Jupiter shows up to interact with those personal planets, it's supporting those personal planets through something that perhaps you had no idea was possible. It's just simply because it's a big planet and it can manifest many things out of the blue. And it often works with an energy of benevolence and hope. So let's move on to Saturn, which is in many ways an opposite energy from Jupiter, because Saturn is where we feel restrictions, where we have to apply ourselves and put in the time, energy, and work, whereas Jupiter can make things happen easily and effortlessly, and they just show up, and you're sitting on a park bench, and all of a sudden things that you need are arriving in front of you. This Saturn energy is where we have to be very mature and serious and make choices. So when Saturn is interacting with your personal planets, it's requiring you to be very clear, to be very aware of the reality of a situation, an experience, of yourself, to be very aware of the choices and decisions that are in your best good from a place of integrity and a place of responsibility. Saturn asks us to cut back and to say no, whether that's to commitments, whether that's to too many things that are in front of you. Saturn is where we hone in on something, and we need to focus, and we need to be aware of what we can truly commit to. Saturn is also connected to experience. People who are older than you, mentors, bosses, authority figures. Saturn is connected as well to a father figure, and that could be your biological father or someone who's just been a father figure to you. And the interesting thing about Saturn is that it also is the archetype of the physical presence of God, meaning God the Father. And I don't mean this in a religious sense, I mean this in an archetypal sense of where do you go for guidance and support? And Saturn can offer that. Saturn can offer what is the best step, what is responsible, what you need to think about for the road ahead, what are the long-term implications of something. So as Saturn interacts with a personal planet, it really brings an energy of maturity and responsibility to that personal planet. And it does depend on what aspect is involved. Meaning, if Saturn is conjunct your sun, well, that is a time of discovering who you are now and a time of making choices about yourself, your life, your direction. If Saturn is trining your Venus, that trine offers support and stability. It can signify something long-term. It can signify that this has the strength to go the distance. That Saturn support will show up and be there for that Venus energy. Now, if Saturn is opposing your moon, that opposition can be draining and exhausting, especially on the moon, because the moon is your daily energy. And that opposition from Saturn is something that can feel like you have so many responsibilities outside of you that you have to take care of, that you're more tired than normal. It can be a turning point. Saturn brings about our life turning points. And it often brings about turning points through the aspects of the conjunction, the square, and the opposition. It can also be through an inconjunct. It's basically the harder aspects of Saturn that require us to make some choices. And these are the choice points that will define our lives, where you have to say yes or no. You have to go in one direction or another. There's usually some kind of reality check with Saturn. So the Saturn energy reminds us of our time on the planet, the time in our physical body, the time in our world, where how are you spending your day? And how you spend your days are ultimately how you spend your life. And so Saturn brings in that check of, is this right for you? Is this the best use of your energy on a daily basis? Saturn can bring in challenges and hardships if you haven't been responsible, if you haven't been dealing with what's in front of you. Because again, it's about maturing. It's about, well, you have to pay the phone bill and you have to take care of the mortgage, or you need to have a job, and within that job you have to be able to handle the responsibilities that show up for you and to perform the job well, etc. So it's very much about how we are showing up in our lives. And these transiting Saturn energies are key. Again, if you have a strong Saturn influence in your natal chart, this is an energy that you're traveling with throughout your whole life. And you're working with Saturn throughout your life to be very clear on how you use your energy. And safe to say that's true for every planet. How am I using my energy, and how is this in alignment with the truth of my energy? The Saturn influence brings in a focusing energy, where the energy in your world could feel very, I'm going to say heavy, in one area of your life, where you're like, this is where I have to exert a lot of effort, time, and energy to make progress. I have to take it slow. I have to be very aware of the steps involved, follow the rules of the book, so to speak. So the Saturn energy can feel heavy at times because it requires a slowdown. Of course, this depends on how you use these energies, how they are for you natally. But there is a seriousness. There's always a seriousness to Saturn, which is meant to put you in alignment with your highest and best path. So transiting Saturn matures us. And then we move on to Chiron. And the energy of Chiron is always quite interesting because it deals with a soul wound, a wound you've carried for lifetimes. And in this incarnation, it can show up in any number of ways, but it's revealing to you what you are here to heal and move through so that you're operating from that soul wound with a higher level of consciousness. Now, Chiron is known as the wounded healer, and it can be very unconscious. It can be a part of ourselves that we're very unaware of until we've had multiple experiences or themes in our life that reveal what a vulnerability is, reveal a weakness, reveal that emotional wound or physical wound, spiritual wound, financial wound, any kind of wound based on where your natal Chiron is. So you look at where your natal Chiron is, and it's showing you we'll call it the piece of the cake that you're here to be very aware of in your life, to be gentle with yourself, because it's where you're also developing a new expression of self and strength. It's the potential for greater strength. Now, the way that the Chiron energy shows up, especially as it interacts with a personal planet, is that it typically will show up as an expression of the lower consciousness of that energy. Chiron is known as the rainbow bridge. It creates a rainbow bridge, and this was something that Barbara Hand-Clough describes in her book about Chiron, that it helps you look at that wound and basically build a bridge to a higher consciousness, a higher healing of that energy. And so the Chiron energy can bring about tears and fears. It can bring about the worries, and I always see it as multiple layers of the cake from other lifetimes. And so we don't consciously know what's going on, but the subconscious is working with fears or insecurities that we've traveled with for lifetimes. And so I feel like when we're working with Chiron, especially Chiron, we're working with our energy at a deeper cellular level to transmute and heal a part of ourselves that has felt limited, has felt it couldn't be accepted, or it wasn't loved, it wasn't seen or recognized or heard. A part of the self has been denied. And where that Chiron energy shows up is asking for that part that's been denied to be accepted and loved. So then here you have transiting Chiron coming around and interacting with your personal planets. And this is where things can feel especially vulnerable or challenging in a way, depending on how these energies show up for you, because it's not only touching on an insecurity, but it's also like pulling up from the bottom of the energy field unhealed aspects of yourself that are all connected. So you can feel, or rather see, an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, and not know how deep it goes with the Chiron. So transiting Chiron is an opportunity to do work on yourself. And it's a time of self-healing, self-care, energy work, especially as it relates to your personal planets. And whatever planet is interacting with Chiron, that's the part of yourself that is needing to be nurtured and cared for. That's where you could, for example, have energy work done. You can work with that chakra. You can go to counseling and talk about that area of your life. You can even self-analyze and look at that area of your life. Perhaps you need to do some body work. Perhaps there's energies that you are looking at from your family or your ancestors. I mean, this can show up in so many thousands of ways. But the intention of Chiron is to be honest with yourself about that wound, that insecurity, that fear, that vulnerability. This is very private stuff. This isn't often what we share on social media or just offer up in a dinner conversation. These are the private, innermost parts of ourselves that we're understanding and that we want to move through. Now, the thing with the Chiron wound is that it is something you travel with throughout your life. But when you're aware of what it is and you're willing to create that rainbow bridge to higher consciousness, you respond differently. It doesn't affect you as much in the same way. It has a different energy around it. And then this is where that energy supports what you're healing in all areas of your life. Now, the Chiron energy is very important to be aware of between the ages of 49 and 51, because at 49, 50, and 51, every single person has what's known as a Chiron return. And that Chiron return is when the transiting planet returns to the same location it was at your birth, and you're looking at your life so far. You're looking at what you have lived, what you have done, what you have created. And then you're also looking at what has been unfulfilling, what has not been heard or seen. Where are you ready to make some changes and to step forward into the next half of your life with greater satisfaction? So the Chiron return at 49, 50, and 51 can open you up to a new life, new choices, new understandings of who you are, new awareness around your relationships, your life choices, your job, your children, your siblings, your families, any number of areas of life. But it's meant to show you what you have left to fulfill. But at first, that Chiron return can feel sinking. Again, Chiron reveals the lower consciousness first. It reveals what has been sitting under the surface that hasn't been healed. So currently, Chiron is in Aries, and that energy can show up through the lower expressions of Aries, which can be impulsiveness, impatience, anger, immaturity, narcissism. The lower expressions of Aries, you can look at that in your world and say, okay, how has this been showing up for me? How have I been participating in these energies unconsciously, and how can I change it? And it's by the conscious awareness and changes of this energy that you open up to a new life and a next chapter and a new beginning that actually feels more in alignment with who you are. The Chiron return is also where you could undergo a very deep healing that even if you didn't do it earlier in your life, you understand something is requiring your attention right now, And it's often a good time with Chiron to focus on healing modalities, therapy, counseling, again, anything that supports healing something that is, trying to get your attention, but you could need support. And it's interesting, I say that, and, Aries is very independent and thinks it can do it alone all the time. But there's something about this Chiron in Aries to remind you that you can ask for help and you can ask for assistance, and other people can be there for you to support you on your own journey. So as Chiron interacts with your personal planets, and or you undergo a Chiron return, there are things that become clearer to you that are transmuted. They are healed. It's a healing process that's underway. Again, very private, but something to be aware of, because it will help you understand yourself, and you'll be perhaps even more compassionate with yourself and what you're going through and what is coming up for you now. Now, again, there's so many ways these energies can show up, and it varies on many factors. All of us have certain transits throughout our lives at the very same time. And I have a playlist for you on YouTube called Significant Lifetime Transits. And it goes through decade by decade how these transits show up. So for example, I just described that everyone experiences their Chiron return between 49 and 51 years of age. And then everyone also has their first, called their Chiron square, in their mid-20s. You have your Saturn return. Everybody has their first Saturn return between 28, 29, and 30 years of age. This is when something matures you. You make a life decision, you take on a new responsibility, you have an advancement, you have a commitment. Something actually formulates your energy into that of an adult. And astrologically speaking, it's your first Saturn return where you are a full-blown adult. And so that's, again, in your late 20s and around 30. And then you have a second Saturn return between 58 and 60. This used to be a time of retirement where you had achieved in your career, you had reached the top, and you were ready to move on to the next chapter in your life. Of course, that has changed, especially with the ways we are living longer, we are healthier, and also the reality of our finances and economics. So not everyone retires between 58 and 60, but it is often a turning point in your life. And this could be empty nest, or you moving homes, or a new dream, or any number of developments that help you look at what time means to you and what you want to do with your remaining time in your life. So those are the Saturn returns. We all have Jupiter returns every 12 years. And that, again, can be something fortuitous, a good development, a boost, things showing up that support us. So if you look back on your life, it would be at 12 years of age, 24 years of age, 36, 48, 60, 72, and so on. And these are all the Jupiter returns that bring about something supportive and often what we've been wanting, something we've wanted. So in addition to these returns of each planet, on this playlist on YouTube, I go through the transits that show up for every decade, and it might be really interesting, if you have time, to go into either your current decade of life or your previous decade of life and look at how these transiting planets changed your world or what showed up for you, and to look at some of the themes and how those themes appeared. In addition to those transits, then we have the other transits that show up and interact with our personal planets. So you can see how astrology becomes quite complex, but that is where it becomes very personal and where it hones in on your individual journey, and why I always support people learning about their astrology, because you're going to see what's coming up for you, have a heads up, be ready for it, understand the themes and the options, and know how to make the best possible choices for yourself. On a personal note, I have throughout 2020 very strong Saturn and Chiron energies. And I remember it was the end of 2018 when I was like, oh, I should see what's happening in 2020. And I looked at my chart and I said, no, thank you. let's just skip that. But no, we can't skip anything, right? So I have throughout this year Saturn squares and Saturn trine. Saturn is trining my Jupiter in Taurus, so I'll take that. That's a great thing. But I'm experiencing these Saturn squares that are, making sure that I'm really clear about what I want and need in my life and to make the right decisions. And then I also have strong Chiron in my chart throughout 2020 and into 2021. So knowing that and knowing the time frame of when the energies are the most intense, it felt really empowering. Really empowering. And that's why astrology is such a great gift, such a great tool, such a great investment of your time, because you can see what the themes are. You can see the timelines. It's really amazing how the timing matches up. I mean, I had things at a 2-week interval. I said, okay, these 2 weeks is when things are going to shift. Guess what? It all changed. And I knew it. But I was ready for it. And I was like, well, let's just see how it shows up. Instead of being caught off guard or, being blindsided or something unexpected happening, I could see, okay, this period of time is when the energy is the strongest. So that's why I want to help you with these transiting energies and to know what's happening in your chart, because again, you're going to feel empowered. You're going to be aware of your choices. You're going to know what is being required of you from the universe, what is being asked of you. And the other part of that is you can also choose not to, right? And then in hindsight, you'll see how the energy showed up anyways. And that's what's really remarkable about astrology. It doesn't require our consent to believe in it. It's not a religion. It's not a belief system. It just is. And that's something that I have found really refreshing and fascinating through the years that I've been studying astrology, is that everything that the astrology says can develop will show up in some form or manifestation. And there are many ways it can transpire, and that's how we never know for sure. We can never be exactly sure, what is going to happen. But when you have an idea of the themes, the timing, the energies involved, all of that, you've got a good grasp on things. You're really in control of your life. And for all the ways that we're not in control of our life, at times we are always able to be in our power and make the right choices with our energy. And astrology supports how you can make the most of your energy. So there is a lot to learn. It is a lot of knowledge and information. That's why I always say go slow with what you're learning, because it takes time to integrate it. It takes time to understand it. And then it takes time to personalize it to yourself. But it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And I do have some other programs that support learning astrology, such as the class about learning transits. Because when you learn transits, then you're really getting an understanding of what's operating in your own chart. I'm excited about astrology because of how it is a useful and beneficial tool for me. And I'm grateful and hopeful that what I offer you supports your own journey too. Because, again, there's so many things that we don't know that we can have experience out of the blue. But when you know that there is something really magical and amazing about the universe, these divine cycles, these themes and patterns and rhythms, it's really quite spectacular that we can tap into them. And in fact, I think it was about a month or so ago, I shared with you how astrology is very similar to economics and meteorology, where you're taking the patterns and themes, the data that showed up previously, and you're charting it, and you're doing a forecast, and you're putting together all these different dynamics to understand what the cosmic weather is going to be for you individually or for us collectively. So I hope that this episode helped connect some dots for you in your own chart or just in your understanding of astrology. Next Monday, I'll be back with part 2 of this topic, and we'll talk about the energies of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those are the outermost planets, the generational planets that work with us at a generational level. And we'll talk about what those energies mean as they interact with your personal planets. Please check out the resources below this podcast because, again, there's a lot to learn, but if you have the time and ability to do so, it will pay off. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I'm Molly McCord, and you can find out more about my current offerings over at mollymccord.online and on my author website at consciouscoolchic.com, which is where you'll find information about my published books, spiritual teachings, and consciousness topics. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you back here on Wednesday for our next weekly energy forecast show. Or feel free to check out any of the episodes in the library here. I've done over 500 podcast episodes in the past 8 years, and I hope you enjoy any topics that might call to you. I'll see you back here soon.